controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are Ace Up Science here to make things make sense.
Whew. So, we're going to talk about this. I think we should still try to be lighthearted. I don't want this to come off in any way as
But you're screwed. I'm kidding.
I think as I was researching some of this, I did have the moment of this is overwhelming and it can be a bit scary. And I want to make it clear, like, that's not the intent. But like we were talking about earlier, it's important to know and understand and have realistic expectations. And also remember, just like at the beginning of the pandemic with these new variants, a lot is unknown. So we're going to talk about what's kind of known today.
Yes. And I will say, I just think like a lot of this information and the sources that I'll just speak for myself, I have been using throughout the pandemic have been so helpful. They've been very accurate. And like one thing I was just thinking about was just like the way in the fall that like we would talk like it's going to be a tough winter. Like it's going to be a tough winter in Toronto, and you know what? It is a tough winter, and I'm just really happy that
like you
I knew that because I remember like in the fall it was like going on a walk with like maybe 4 friends with our masks on and just being like, at least we can do this, and like because we won't maybe be able to do this in the winter, and like I'm just saying I think that this is just coming from similar sources, Nature magazine, Science magazine,
right?
The most recent,
these are the best guesses that people have.
The smartest scientists telling us the information. It doesn't mean it's necessarily true because it's preprints and early, but we just need to know these things, I think, to maybe have a better way of like preparing for the future. But let's go off. Tell me how many there are.
We could start. Yeah, I thought we would just kind of touch
there's more than one.
base on, there's a lot. I thought we could quickly touch base on variants in general, go through the ones that are kind of circulating now that we've been able to identify. We, not being us, but the brilliant scientists around the world. Basically, though, I wanted to say that, you know, genetic or mutations in viruses is expected, very common. Most epidemiologists, most scientists, geneticists would have expected this. Of course, it was bound to be variants in any virus that's around for an extended period of time. I mean, that's why we deal with seasonal flus that are changing. There's constantly variants. Sometimes the mutations confer no advantage. Sometimes they confer a disadvantage for the virus. But the ones that we obviously talk about and notice are the ones that have some sort of mutation or a series of mutations that leads to it becoming more effective, infectious, deadly, those kind of things.
Also, it's important to know that flu viruses mutate a lot more easily than coronaviruses. So coronaviruses are more slow in nature in mutating. So that's good. That's good for us.
But I mean, it's around the whole world.
It's running rampant.
The problem with it, this is why social distancing, quarantining, and vaccine can be so important, because the more it spreads, the more chances it have of replicating, and that means there's more chances for mutation. So
Which
it's
is
just
a
the same
way to think about staying home. Like, I always am just trying to be like, how do we convince people? Like, there's a lot of different talking points. People are getting frustrated, but that's just another thing. Like, the more it mutates, the more people are out living their lives normally, the more likely it is to mutate and become a more effective virus. It's just another reason to be like, this is why we need to stay home. Yeah. And this is why it is.
And that's why the more variants there are and potential ones that could be resistant to a vaccine, if we can prevent that from happening and vaccinate everyone, they don't have the chance to become ineffective, or you know what I mean, like better against the vaccine.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of part of anyway. Okay. So one last caveat is that there has been a ton of other variants, and a lot of them were not any worse or any different. In fact, the one that we are most familiar with, like since June 2020, has been a variant. The main thing that most people have been getting infected with over the last 8 months or so was actually a variant from the first cases that they had seen in early March and stuff like that. So it's good to know, and that they think that one was a little more infectious, as in it could spread easier. So first variant is called B117, and this is the one that the UK is talking about. You let me know if I ever say something that you think is wrong.
So what? No, I'm not. But what I think is really funny is that the big up and atom. That's something. The big up and atom in Nature magazine right now is, how do we name these?
Right.
Because
How did they name these?
The B117 has to do with the amino okay, so the South Africa one is 501YV2. It's because it's the 51st amino acid site of the virus spike protein.
Okay.
So it's like all
Right, just
related to
very
the biology. So the big question right now is we want to get away from the stigma of it being like the British variant, the South
the UK variant.
Oh, funny. We're getting over the stigma when it's the white country that has, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh yeah, we call it Zika. Like, it's just like, it's frustrating how like now they're like, all the scientists are like, well, we gotta get the stigma right. I'm like, well, every other virus in the past, like from a lot of places that weren't just like the UK, now we can't call it the British variant. Anyways, I get why that's smart. We don't want stigmatize the place. But then B117 is so meaningless to people that right now they're calling them the like something like they want to maybe say the more contagious variant. Like they want to name it something that people
can have some kind of like actual concept around what it means.
But honestly, like go on Nature magazine or Science magazine or any of these academic journals, write to them. They're looking for help
Of how to name
like the public consciousness of like what is
it's like
the right
naming
way.
stars. It's like I'd like to name it the Mitchell variant. They're like, oh, that's a good name.
No one wants to be named.
Or it's like hurricanes where they're like, okay, it's time for the Z. Okay, so B117. So this is where it's going to sound kind of bleak. So it's up to 70% more transmissible due to 22 coding changes in the virus genome. And they think that those changes make it bind to human cells more easily. So that's why it's become so much easier to catch because it's around and like you don't have to maybe be like in as direct contact with it. They found this one in late December, and they are kind of calling it the UK variant because I think that's where it kind of first took off, whether or not that is what it should be called. And around 60% of new cases in London at the end of December were this variant. And possibly a higher disease severity. But these things are all still being
what I would say about that is like the studies and preprints that are coming in are kind of going back and forth between what exactly is the reason for the severity. So one is like, oh, it's actually causing worse disease in people. But then another study will come out and say like, no, that actually doesn't make sense because based on genomic sequencing, how they're getting this information is like flawed because it's like real. Sometimes they're just testing at hospitals where people are already severely sick when they got there. So there's a lot of these caveats that like the headlines are scary, but they really don't know if it's because it's more infectious or because it's more deadly. And depending on what you read, it will tell you different things. The B117.
That's fair. I think all of these, to be honest, some of them they do think are more infectious. They do think are more deadly, but you're right. It's like there are not enough studies or research right now to conclusively say that we know this to be true.
Okay, so move on to the next one.
So B1351.
Wait, can I guess? B1351. The one in Brazil?
Nope. It's a South Africa one. I know you had a different name for it. So
the 501. I have 501YV2.
They have multiple names.
Oh my God. See, this is again, email Nature. They need help. What is it called?
Like, I don't know why. I just only wrote down one of them.
Okay.
This one has a higher viral load, so it's the one in South Africa, potentially more infectious than the earlier variants. The concern for this one is that it can better target healthy cells, which has been a concern. But again, no solid evidence that it's more deadly, but they think it might be. Okay,
cool.
Next
that's
major
like, sadly,
one?
that's where we're at. We're like, we
hope it's not more deadly. There are the next main one, then there's just two final ones, is P1, which is Brazil.
Okay.
So I didn't realize this. So a couple little facts. So it has now triggered a bigger outbreak. They had one of the cities, and I don't know how to pronounce this, but in Brazil, Manaus.
Yeah, what was it? I keep hearing it on
Manaus.
the podcast. Yeah, sure.
So I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, but so there's like over 2 million people that live there. There was a major outbreak last spring, and they think this new variant is actually going to be worse.
Yeah.
And so when that first outbreak happened, 76% of that city was infected.
Okay, I know. This is the craziest part about this. How? I'm like, how did I not know this? A place in the world where 76% of people were affected with coronavirus. So that is a fascinating Petri dish and case study of these people have already had it. Like the antibodies.
Makes you realize
like, what?
how segmented the world is and it might be a language thing where like we only really think about the countries that have news that are in English, Or it might just be like this Western ideology that we always talk about England and we know about Australia and New Zealand and America. But I'm like, how did I not know that a city in Brazil was 76% infected?
Also, how did I not know there's a city in Brazil with 2 million people? I'm like, I've never, you know what I mean? Like these populated places.
Right.
I'm like,
We're
yeah,
just
like
ignorant
that's the
too.
second biggest city in Canada. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like that's like Montreal.
So they thought at the time that they were like, we must have herd immunity. So many people have been infected, but now they're realizing that's probably not true, or because this new variant is being found in 46% of the samples.
And they're really struggling. Like their hospital systems are real. That's really sad right now. They're truly running out of oxygen. So if 76% of them were infected with coronavirus before, that's the one that to me has been getting to me the most.
Yeah,
so as I read it, I'm like, this can't
the other
be good.
piece of information for that is that, you know, we've always been unsure if you get infected, can you get infected again? Or do you have immunity for the rest of your life? And some people have said, oh, you're for sure safe for 6 months, like these things. And so they're wondering if this actually might also be because it's long enough from that first outbreak that the same people can get infected again.
And there's also other, again, when you read scientific from the source preprints, there's so many caveats that you pick up that you like want to tell everyone, because it's like no one tells you this in the news. They just say like that may be more dangerous, but it's like there's so many things. So it's a specific city in a specific country where there are so many different like health patterns, or you can't always extrapolate information from Manaus. We can't even pronounce it. Manaus to your life somewhere else in the world. There's so many factors. Comorbidities are a big issue with all of these things being worse. They're like, wait, are these variants actually worse for the general public, or are they worse for people with diabetes? Like there's just so many factors.
And every city and every culture is also going to have different behaviors as people in terms of like how many people, how closely do people live together? Are they using transit still? Is the city still running? Is everyone wearing masks? So it is hard to, it's not apples to apples always, because the variables in every place is so different.
It's so interesting to think that many people got it in the first round. And now it's
how do we not
boggles
talk
my
about
mind.
that or know that? I feel so stupid.
I always feel stupid every day.
Two more. Well, actually, just really one more, but then
I know. I was like, I only knew about those ones.
So this one I also did not know, and it blew my mind. Okay, so cluster 5 from Denmark.
Clusterfuck.
That's what it's called. It is. I think one of the main reasons they realize that it can be transmitted to animals and back to humans. So this is like known as the mink.
Oh my God. Okay.
So I didn't know that this happened because it was found in minks. They killed 17 million minks.
Oh no.
Isn't that crazy?
It was devastating.
Like, because I guess they were just worried about like how fast it could spread in minks, and then if it can spread from minks to humans, like how out of control that could get.
Like genocide of minks. And just like, oh my God, humans are so intense. Like we're just like, okay, there's like there's a subtle freaking like, no, there's a chance that you might have a boom.
Yeah, I think if I recall, it was like only a few hundred people had this variant, and then they were like, kill all the minks.
I'm not,
but probably for the best.
Okay, it goes back to your moral dilemma that's going viral on TikTok about the dogs and the people. It's like obviously people are going to kill the dogs because they're murdering 40,000 mink.
Well, everyone on TikTok was not killing the dogs.
Yeah, true. Everyone on TikTok is having a bit of an issue right now. They're like, what's wrong with me? Also, people wear mink coats. If you wear a mink coat, you suck. Okay, continue.
So all I'll say is that Denmark does claim that this variant has been eradicated so far as everyone's been able to tell.
Okay, now
because it didn't actually spread that far, but I think they were just worried if it's in minks, how big of a problem can this become really fast?
I also just had a thought where I'm like, well, they better make a lot of coats.
I'm like,
you
also
better not just throw them out.
Why? I don't know anything about minks, and I was like, where are those 17 million minks? I didn't know we had minks like that.
Well, it's Denmark. It's not you.
I don't mean us. I just mean humans. Like, are they? Is this for fur that they're there? Do they eat them?
Oh, I see. You're like, are these farms? Oh my God.
Yeah, these were farms. I don't think they were catching minks in the wild.
Oh my God, you're right. Okay, now I am.
There were definitely just like 17 million minks across like a bunch of farms, and I was like,
sound off in the comment below why there's so many minks in Denmark. First of all,
yeah, like, do we have that many minks in Canada?
Okay, Danish listeners, please let us know.
Okay, and then the final one.
They hunted 14. Okay, now I'm like, you're right. They obviously weren't like everyone get in the forest. And
they didn't
the minks.
they didn't have like a countrywide hunt of mink.
Like, imagine they're like, we need to kill all the squirrels. We would be like, we're going crazy. We're chasing squirrels throughout the city. We'd lose. They'd be like,
I wonder how many squirrels are in Ontario.
Oh, so many. I love squirrels.
Is it like 17 million?
I think it's, wow, interesting.
How many squirrels?
In Ontario? Oh, I can't even take a guess, but I'm going to say, I guess anyways, 3 million. Is that crazy?
We need to look this up. How many squirrels are in this dang city?
I keep
How many
saying
raccoons?
Sound off in the comments below, and I'm not kidding. Please, we need your information on this, and then you can come on as a guest for our next upcoming
Whoever
episode.
gets the
Squirrels.
closest guest
Yeah.
wins. No more other variants. The only one I was going to mention was the first one was called D614G. That was the original variant, but
What do you mean? The one from March or from June? Sorry?
from June. That was like the one that we are probably most familiar with. That was the first sort of variant from like, in March and April, we were all talking about coronavirus. Then in the middle of June, this variant became more infectious and became the dominant variant.
All right, cool. So there's your 5. So we are going to take a quick break for a comment corner and come back and talk about genomic sequencing, which is how we're going to get more information about these variants.
Okay.
Oh no, hit the comment corner.
Oh, I forgot we have that button.
Comment corner.
A little peek behind the curtain.
Oh my goodness. Like we don't do comment corners that often. I just didn't know what button to push.
So this is from the YouTube video of Winter How to Cope and Thrive, that episode. And the highest rated comment says, Greg staring into the camera whenever Mitch is talking, stared right into my soul. Oh my God. And then I was like, what? And then I pressed play and was like, oh my gosh. Because what I do is I'm like, I know that when you're YouTuber, I hate that word. You're used to looking into the camera. Like I know that I'm sure every actor doesn't know how that feels because you're not supposed to look down the barrel of the camera unless you're Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Anyways, so I'm so used to it that this whole time it's just naturally for my eyes to go into the camera. So while you're talking, my eyes rest there and I take in what you're saying. But I'm like, it looks just crazy.
I need to go watch that. That's so funny. Yeah, I think I do too, but maybe I more look at you. I look around. I just think and. I think that is a funny thing I've noticed about you, even in our videos. Like when I'm talking, even if it's scripted, your face will be so intense into the camera.
So I'm gonna either work on that, but I haven't even thought about it until I just read it again. So this whole episode on YouTube might also be looking like a death stare. But
no, it's fine. It's endearing to stare into someone's soul so deeply that you frighten them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I thought it was cute and funny, and at least we're making eye contact. So let's get back into it.
Fun. I love looking at the comments. Thanks for writing them, guys.
That is so not true. Lying, bold-faced lying.
What?
Me and Mitch also have such a hard time looking at bad comments.
Oh, I'm not talking about the bad comments. Everyone's so nice on our podcast.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm just saying it's just a funny thing because it's we also were you're like, I love looking at the comments. I'm like,
girl, I don't mean on ASAP Science. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not looking at those. There's dangerous. We've had to put up filters for a lot of swear words that are towards gay people.
And then sometimes we pour ourselves red wine and read them.
Should we do it tonight?
Are you kidding? We're
it's not a good time.
You can't even handle the national. We're not doing that. So genomic surveillance is how we are figuring out that these gene variants even exist. And it's coming to the stage, genomic surveillance. It is really coming into its own as a technology right now because we need it. Never before have we tracked the genomic sequencing of a virus like this in the last year. So aggressively. As it's happening. But again, what the constant takeaway from what I'm about to say is we need to do more of it. Like the contact tracing that scientists just keep screaming into the ether and it feels like people aren't listening. This is what we need to be doing. So thankfully, some countries are doing it well, like the UK and Denmark. Interesting. They both have found variants. So that's a little scary. It's okay, why are they all popping up in places where they're sequencing them? So this is just another reason we need to be a little scared. Because, for example, America, I know you've had a rough 4 years. You've had an anti-science president, has barely sequence the genome of the virus is running rampant. It's
awfully suspicious that the countries with the most cases are not necessarily the ones finding the variants, whereas that's what you would think statistically.
Yeah, so you mean suspicious in what way? Sorry, what does that mean?
Suspicious not in a conspiracy way. It's probably because they're not looking properly. Denmark's population is tiny. How did they find? And maybe it's easier for them to be testing everyone, but you'd think say there's a million cases in Denmark and then there's like 30 million cases somewhere else, you'd expect the variant, like the mutations in a place where there's tons and tons of activity and infections to be more likely. That it's interesting to think that maybe America or a place like even like India or Mexico, like places that have had like huge skyrocketing cases, might actually be the result of variants that just were never sequenced or caught.
Yeah, so they're not sequencing them, so it's very scary. So suspicious is a word that to me
I didn't mean like suspicious that
like
they're
meaning of like they're doing it intentionally. Like
No,
it's not.
no.
It's like lack of science, lack of the messaging from scientists being like this is important, but it costs money, it costs time, and people don't think it's that important. I think, but now we're going to be entering the year of the COVID variants that I think we're going to be entering the year of genomic sequencing of viruses. So this is like the technology that we are going to be relying on. I think you might all start hearing that word more and more, genomic sequencing. But it's really cool science. And what is also really interesting is that they were genomic sequencing the original variant, or the one that was from June, by you would test positive for the virus through a kit in the UK that would make sure you had 3 different genes for the spike protein. That's how they would know you had it.
Okay.
So this genome sequencing kit, there was like what ended up happening is that you would test positive, but you'd only have 2 of the genes. And so that other gene that you no longer had was the one that was mutated. So they were able to then go, wait, there's a mutation
Something's
happening here.
changed.
But now that same kit is now telling us, and they go back and they're like, all the people who tested positive, but only had those 2 genes, that's the variant.
Oh my
and
gosh.
then that's how they were able to get all this information. And we were now getting to sit here and say, oh my God, the B117 variant. So like,
Right.
that kit, that genomic testing sort of science came together, and what is a bit of like serendipity to create our knowledge. But it's like you need even just those weird kits and this technology to even have those moments. And the South African virus was a grassroots genomic sequencing project that like a small group of people decided to do, then found that one. So it's like, oh my gosh, like we need to be doing this because we're seeing all these mutations happening. You're right. Again, where people are testing. So what's happening in places like America where they're not? So it's just very
It
like,
overwhelms me to hear this.
oh, really?
Well,
Did I just CBC the national you? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that.
Because I guess I'm like, the variants may become a large problem and they may not, right? So not catching them might be okay, assuming we can vaccinate everyone and that the variants aren't are like that the vaccine can still work on these variants. So that is like there's a world where there are actually so many more variants than are listed even here. Like say there's even 20. That might be true, and maybe the vaccine works on all of them, and we may not ever realize there was 20.
Yeah.
That's okay. But I start to get scared, and in my head, when I'm just like, what if there are now, just like a bunch of variants that like we're starting from scratch. That's just like,
I know. It's really hard. So what we can always go back to, and what I do and go back to, like other than zooming out of this planet and being like, oh, life is just beautiful, nature's beautiful, or staring at like literally like hugging trees. I do that a lot now. I'm just like, oh my God, I love you. I'm so sorry about the climate crisis. I love you so much. I do hug you, but I'm just saying there's something about like the trees that make me existentially feel like when I hug you, I feel each other's collective fear. The tree is not scared. The tree is like, y'all can scream, but like, I'm literally good.
Yeah, the tree is like, I'm immune.
Yeah, it's like, actually, could you guys peace out? Fossil fuels will stop burning and we'll take over.
The mink needs your hug.
Yeah. Oh my God.
They're like, what? Wait, we can get it?
We're like, oh yeah, you can. We're actually going to machete all of you.
Oh no.
Okay. But what I go back to is physical distancing, contact tracing, it still needs people to come together to spread. So yes, it is scary, but like there fundamentally are ways that we can stop viruses. I know we've had troubles with this in the past, but as things go on, as it becomes, people maybe get more upset. A part of me thinks they're going to be like, okay, we need to stop this. So we're going to be getting our vaccines, the best vaccines that we can possibly, but I don't know if I'm going to scare you more with this, but I think it's worth saying with these variants, with these vaccines, we are seeing them be administered in America at record numbers. I'm happy that this vaccine hesitancy conversation doesn't seem to be like this guiding principle for a lot of people. Canada, we're having some issues with getting them, but we will be getting them. Affluent places will be getting them. The whole world needs to be vaccinated in order for this issue to go away. So I'm like, I don't want you to like be overwhelmed by what I'm going to say, but from reading about these variants is leading to this other conversation that is like, I think there was a headline this week. People are talking about, they're like, oh, so-and-so says we're not going to have the world back to normal till 2023, ... It's from a specific article about the variants. Because their argument is, if we vaccinate, all these wealthy countries, because sadly we live in this capitalist place, that's not going to stop the spread of the
variants that would be resistant to the vaccine to like proliferate elsewhere and then just come back.
And then have the vaccine not work on them.
Yeah.
Yes. So I just think, I know that can be a depressing thought, but what I want everyone to take away from that is that vaccine nationalism is not going to be a bad thing in the long run.
Yeah.
So it's like
you might make your country safe for a bit, but it will just be like when we ignored China's outbreak at first, and then we ignored it in Spain, and we were like, oh, that's crazy that Spain's having all these people die, and then it came, and it's like, oh, it's gonna happen to us if we're not like looking to the rest of the world and realizing what's happening.
Exactly. So there are a lot of initiatives where the affluent countries are like, we need to figure out how to get this to everyone for a lot of reasons. And I mean, clearly I'm just a pessimist in my head. They're just like, they're capitalists and they're like, well, we need to export our labor somewhere, so they got to be healthy too. That's what I think. It's not out of this goodness of their heart. They're like, we want business to work.
Yeah.
But
I mean, at this point, whatever will get people to do it.
Exactly. And I think that it will happen. It might take till 2023 to get the world vaccinated. And I just think that's an important thing. I think we should understand that, okay, Canada, small country, say we get them all by September. Everyone seemingly thinks they're going to go into the streets and rejoice. Maybe you will do that, but
you might have a bit of a break, but it doesn't mean it's over.
It's not, the world is not going to be vaccinated, and you can't think that you are going to have a normal life until the world is. The sooner we can realize that, the sooner we can get the I made a video about this called The World Vaccine. The sooner we can get the initiative set in place from places like the UN and WHO to get the world vaccinated. So anyways, it's just it is a long game. It doesn't mean it's a long game for everyone. For those little initial spurts of excitement, life is obviously really hard right now, but it's just the reality that we're living in as sentient beings on this here planet. That we are. I was about to just be like, that we are ruining it. I'm like, Greg, just stop.
Don't bring it up right now.
Freaking be positivo.
I know we've kind of said this. I have one quote from Fauci, Daddy Fauci, that is just to reiterate this kind of mentality of why we need to work together. And this is the quote. Viruses cannot mutate if they don't replicate, and if you stop their replication by vaccinating widely and not giving the virus an open playing field to continue to respond to the pressures that you put on it, you will not get mutations. So that's just really what you said. And that has to be the responsibility of not only looking at your own country, but realizing if other countries are neglected, it just leaves room for the virus to continue mutating and then make its way back into your country and start from zero again.
So we hope you enjoyed.
happy.
No, it's I'm sure people listening to this podcast and having seen the title and knowing who we are knew what was going to happen. You're just going to get the updated information, and we can't sugarcoat all these things, but they are in some ways more sensational and scary when you hear from other places. In some ways, maybe not so much because you're not even wanting to know this information, but it's the reality, and we will keep you updated in the future as these things continue to evolve.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you
leave some more comments on YouTube. It's fun to look at them. I do actually look at those comments.
Yeah,
because
you're
all so nice and cute, and it makes me happy.
On the podcast one, too.
A lot of people were saying we should put this side note thing on the wall, but I'm like, do you think we have a skill with a hammer? No.
We're gay.
We're gay.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, it's so cool.
Yeah, so we have a neon sign we've talked about a lot. Fuse Neon. Make sure you check them out. They're from Toronto. They're so freaking cool.
But we will put it on the wall. But also, I was like, I don't know if we're gonna ruin this wall if we do that, or I don't know.
So we'll do it one more time. Sound off in the comments below if you think you know how and where we should place the nail for hanging this sign.
Is there some way that we don't have to put nails in?
You're looking at me I know that what you're saying, someone who knew would be of
God.
course there is, but when you looked at me, I was like, I have no idea.
Okay. Well, yeah, hashtag Sidenote Podcast. Let us know what you think, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Peace.
Bye.